Welcome, everyone, to the Religion Unplugged podcast, your one-stop shop for all the most important religion, news, and culture. I am here today with Marcus Pittman. He is the founder and CEO of the Christian streaming service Loor, an entrepreneur, content creator, social media manager with over 10 years of experience in the faith-based film industry, who now wants to turn it all upside down. So, Mr. Pittman, welcome to the show.
How's it going, man? Thanks for having me.
Good, good. We've had some fun conversations before, and I'm glad to talk to you today.
Yeah, I want to apologize for being in the car though, because I don't like podcasts that are in the car. But I had a very last minute flight to Arizona, and this was the best I could do. But if you have me on again, I'll have my sweet video game Twitch streaming set up, and it'll be nice, man. So.
I look forward to it.
All right.
So yeah, I guess the first thing is, for people who don't know what Loor is, there's a lot of content out there in the faith-based film industry, and there's even more than one streaming service aimed at Christians. So what makes Loor different?
There is no Christian streaming service. First, I'll talk about what makes Loor different, and then I'll talk about specifically where we're targeting. So the thing that makes Loor different is we allow our monthly subscribers to use video game microtransactions like you see in Fortnite or Roblox or whatever to be able to fund movies and TV shows that'll stream on the platform for everybody. So think of it as the community coming together, spending their monthly subscription dollars, actually determining what gets funded and streamed and whatnot. And so what we've done is we've created this independent punk rock art house for Christian film, experimental animation, adult cartoons without the, usually reference, but just cartoons for older people.
It's not porn. You're not making porn.
Yeah,
you're making
we're not
for mature audiences without the porn. Yes.
Yeah, or cheap like Family Guy sex joke references. We're not doing any of that stuff. But some cartoons and some stories are for adults, and some cartoons and stories are for kids. And but I think what's really sets us apart, besides the funding mechanisms, which is huge, is I think we're the only streaming platform in the past 50 years, or actually I would say in the past 50 years, the only Christian entertainment that's really been focused on college and teenager men. The entire Christian film industry has been built around Lifeway Christian bookstores being this distribution point for movies, books, and movies, and it's all been for women because they were the ones that shopped at Lifeway Christian bookstores. And no one's ever tried to just say, hey, why don't we make stuff for men? Why don't we make movies for men and not movies about bad husbands for the wives to bring their husbands to get fixed? Why don't we actually make movies for men where, they're risking their lives and they're dying and there's actual enemies and there's war and stuff like that. And not, all of our Christian movies right now are just like personal relationship sort of stuff. Right.
No, that's really interesting. Again, I've written about the Christian film industry for a while, and everybody I know in the Christian film industry who's either in it or is commenting on it or is part of the marketing of it or has worked in it has said the same thing that you're saying right now, which is that the Christian film industry, the faith-based industry, targets women, particularly Christian moms, as their demographic. And you have
Daily Wire's doing that with Bent Key. The Chosen, you can read about The Chosen, how they basically, I like to say they basically in a lab created The Chosen for 35-year-old women. Everything is for that market, and nobody wants to just go, just like, but we have the internet now, and just like the days of cable TV where you can have an MTV channel, you can have a VH1 channel and 2 country music channels, for each different thing. Why don't we just create a young male-driven Christian streaming platform that's just super punk rock focused and experimental? And, nobody wants to do that. Everybody wants to be safe and keep those safe sort of stories, lifetime
So, so,
stories.
so I have two questions related to that because that's really interesting. First of all, and you alluded to this a little bit. What makes a Christian streaming service targeted toward men? How do you make
Yeah,
what goes into the calculation of doing that?
yeah. Well, I think it's just understanding that there are masculine stories and there's masculine entertainment and there's female entertainment. And and just in the same way there's female driven worship and masculine worship. And I think when you're talking about like female driven worship, which is a majority of churches today, a lot of that worship is very inward and it's, dealing with personal conflicts and God rescuing from personal conflicts. When we talk about masculine worship, it's very much driven towards there's an enemy out there and the enemy must be defeated and there's a war, right? And you think of like a mighty fortress is our God. That's a masculine song, and it's just talking about defeating Satan and one strong word will fail him, right? And so it's just like there's and when you read through the Psalms too, their worship poetry about enemies and fighting and battle and then when you get to the feminine worship, it's all very inward and emotional and that sort of stuff. And because that's how women are. They're very nurturers. They're like that's how it's good for women to be that way. But I think when we only all of our entertainment, they say that worship is downstream from culture, right? So, and is that right? Did I say that right?
I hear politics is downstream from culture. I don't know if I've heard
Politics
worship
is
downstream.
politics is downstream from culture, right? So everything is really focused towards what we have in our culture. I think. I'm sorry. It's churches. You know what?
I know what you're
early in the morning.
about.
There's something about being downstream somewhere, and it's somewhere. It's we're a fish in a river or something, and the church is either at the top. I forget.
No, it's definitely true. I mean, you see, certainly this is an interesting. I mean, for our audience listening, what's interesting is that a lot of what you're saying here is really kind of very well known in the entertainment industry, the secular entertainment industry, in terms of, I mean, the data on female-led action films up until like maybe the past few years, that female-led action films, overwhelmingly their audience was men. Because female-led action films were still, okay, I have to kill the bad guy. I have to defeat the bad guy. I have to, well, more specifically, I have to overcome my inner weaknesses in order to triumph over an external threat. And of course, even if you had a female protagonist, it would primarily appeal toward men. And then you have, the same reason sports movies were primarily, appeal toward men. And superhero movies, you have that 60-40 split, sometimes 70-30. And, romance stories or, stories about reconciliation like Frozen or whatever would, again, 60-40, 70-30 primarily appeal to women. And so even if it was a male protagonist, again, those kind of stories, Dr. Jonathan Haidt has done kind of work on this about some primary values cross-culturally between men and women, like men being agency and women being communion, which is why men get addicted to video games and women get addicted to social media. Like there's that kind of thing that goes on. And so you're with your stories trying to say, okay, we have for the past like 20 years of the faith-based film industry exclusively been telling stories about faith, whether in books or in movies, that appealed toward what the secular film industry would talk about as sort of female skewing entertainment. And so you're saying, well, why don't we do expressions of faith in entertainment that skews toward male, skews toward male, which again is you kind of would say, well, sure, why not? Although I will give you one reason why not. I'll give you one reason why not, demographically, is that overwhelmingly the people who are most invested in going to church and their religious identity have been women for, the past several decades. Now that's starting to change. Go ahead.
Say
Yeah.
that's because, I would say that's because the entertainment has been primarily focused towards them, right? So
But isn't
when
that
you
a
have
chicken or the isn't that a chicken or the egg
no,
question? Because it
when you
was.
have when you have
Go ahead.
Lifeway Christian bookstores, right? From Lifeway Christian bookstores is basically you had this distribution point all over the country for all Christian entertainment, worship, media, and that sort of stuff, right? And so because of Lifeway Christian bookstores, you had K-Love and you had Christian film industry. See, this whole world was built around female driven worship and church style, that sort of thing. That's where you get your Beth Moores that grew really popular, and then that entered into the church as well, because now all of a sudden all the stuff that's being played to be sold at Lifeway Christian bookstores is also being sung at church, because that's the popular mainstream sort of worship sort of stuff. And so I think, like, what you're seeing now is you have, I mean, Gen Z, especially Gen Z males, are just not putting up with the woke nonsense. They're listening to Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson, and they're watching Braden Sorbo on TikTok, which is Kevin Sorbo. So he's got 2 million followers, just making fun of like women on the whatever podcast, right? Like that's his whole 2 million followers. So there's this massive Gen Z male following that's, you can call it Chad Trad or whatever. But I think like they realize that like once they get red pilled, like conservatism isn't enough. It's like you need to be grounded in something way more deeper. And now they're starting to go back to church, and they're looking for the churches, that didn't close during COVID, right? They're looking for the churches that's right. So that's where all the men are going and finding these churches now.
Well, that's true. The Gen Z, the change from Gen Z being, because Gen Z is the first generation in many decades for Christian that men are actually outnumbering women in attending church.
Right.
The thing is, I will say, to counterpoint what you said, the Lifeway isn't the cause of the women outnumbering men at church, because it predates that by many decades. Kind of women
right.
outnumbering.
Right. I think they popularized it and mainstreamed it, and created a business around.
It did, yes. Yeah. It created business around it, which is why they didn't. But now, okay, so, but you're right. There is a what you call it? There is an opportunity, like you're saying. Okay, now that there is a groundswell, and partly it's the mix of politics and faith, like you said. Like people are, like, you have the Bertrand Russell effect, where men are being like, wow, I really don't like the sort of secular, progressive, woke, as you said, world. I'm going to leave that. And what do I have to ground me there? And who have been like the historical combatants of that world? It's the Christians. And so I'm attracted to that. And so there are this group of men who are going and embracing Christianity because they see them as the best enemy, in a sense, or a real philosophy to ground themselves, to be for something rather than just against something. And that's very true. So there is an opportunity there. It is still the potential weakness of this is it is hyper specific. It's one of the most hyper specific audiences that I've seen in this space. Because again, it's not like Angel Studios, which is like we're faith friendly, conservative friendly, family friendly, but like we're kind of have all of that umbrella. Or even Daily Wire is just like it's conservatives. It's not just Christian conservative men. Do you find that as a challenge that you're trying to overcome, that you're going for this very specific audience?
No, because our fundamental philosophy as a streaming platform is any good story is a Christian story. So, like you look at The Mandalorian, right? Mandalorian is this, I would say, this masculine Christian story of this father protecting an adopted son. So that and of course there's the themes of baptism and repentance and stuff once you get to the third season. It's crazy. It's amazing how religious that show is, but it's ultimately it's a good story because it's a Christian story. And so like we have like Issa Terra on our show, which is not really a faith-driven show. There's adult language in it, and it's a science fiction show about artificial intelligence. And each episode is a different. Each short film is a different entry into the same world. And so it's made by Christians, but it's not this preachy evangelistic sort of tag at the end. And then we have shows like Barely Biblical, which is a Christian show, and it's teddy bears reenacting the most violent Old Testament Bible stories, right? So which is a comedy, animation for teenagers and above, right? So, circumcision is whether the teddy bears have a nip in their tag or not. And the guy that does the voice, James Arnold Taylor, is the voice of Obi-Wan in Star Wars, Clone Wars, right? So, I mean, like, the talent's really there. The filmmakers in Hollywood don't want to leave Hollywood to make Hallmark movies. And so what we found is that the filmmakers are just ready to just make whatever. They don't even care, like, if it's Christian content or not. They just don't want to do Hollywood stuff. And then, of course, so if I were to really specify Loor's market, I would say we are Christians, conservative men, but we're going after just that broad Joe Rogan audience. Right, like that Joe Rogan male audience, that younger audience, and the movies don't have to be evangelistic, but the algorithm can be, right? Like you get people on your streaming platform and they watch a really cool science fiction short series, and then the next thing you know, they watch this other thing that's like, maybe a little bit more theological than they're used to. The idea that you have, like, every movie has to be a gospel track is one of the dumbest things Christians have ever invented, because God's greatest work in art, as it says in Romans 1, the heavens and the earth declare the glory of God, but it's not enough to save anyone, right? So there's no gospel message in the heavens and the earth and all the created work of art that God did. But when we do our art, we try to be like, a special revelation, when God just did, general revelation for all his art. So I think we have freedom to make whatever story we want. And it doesn't have to be this faith-based sort of script. We have to have a pony, we have to have a horse and a dog and a little girl, and there's this formula that's required for every major Christian film that comes out. And it's just silly.
Yeah, no, again, one of the things I like best, I mean, obviously, like, I'm, part of that target market of, like, the young Christian guys. They're like, man, I would really like a sci-fi show that the basis of its imagination isn't explicitly, secular humanism, like Star Trek.
Right.
It's like, I love Star Trek, but the entire basis of its imagination is explicitly anti-religious. Wouldn't it be nice if there was, some, sci-fi show that the basis of it that was just as good or just as creative and just as kind of exciting? But
let me just jump in with
imagination was, yeah.
Let me just jump in with Esoterra real quick, because it's a general science fiction show. But think of it more in terms of Black Mirror, where every episode is different. But the creator, specifically Nick, he's currently actually he's deployed in the military right now. But when he made it, he said, when I watch Black Mirror or the Twilight Zone, when I watch Black Mirror, the Twilight Zone, every episode is completely different, and the rules change all the time. The world changes every time. And he said, but God's world doesn't do that. So what I wanted to do is create that science fiction show, but the rules remain the same, because it's the same world every time, the same disaster, post-apocalyptic thing, because God's law is objective and those rules don't change. So you have these different stories, but they're all bound to the same. So yes, but it's not like, you wouldn't know that unless you talk to him. His reasoning. So, but that's the sort of freedom we allow artists to do. Just make whatever you want. You're a Christian,
and that's really cool.
You're gonna make a Christian thing. So,
and I also like that's the other thing I like, is that I like the fact that you are trying to do experimentation. Another show you have, and just like, hey, let's try things and see what works. Another show you have, you've talked to me about before, is the one that's just each episode is, a different filmmaker doing something different, like a different cartoon or and it's kind of a showcase to experiment with different kinds of shows that you can do. And like that's the thing I think. Like I've talked about this before. I like the fact that there's actually an industry out there that cares about moms, like, and treating them not like kind of as problems like Hollywood does. I like the faith-based industry does that. But I don't like the fact that that's all that they do. And so, having a place like Loor that's trying to do a bunch of experimental stuff, again, as a film critic of faith-based films, that gets me very excited to kind of do that punk rock, let's experiment and try different things. So what would you say, again, so you got the esoteria, you said, you got the barely biblical. I watched your documentary Gothics, which I really enjoyed, and so my review of that's going to come out very soon. And I still have to watch Fleur de Lis. But what are some things, like, besides what you talked about, for people who to get excited about if they were to subscribe to Loor?
Yeah, I think like Fleur de Lis, I think, is probably one of our most popular in terms of like the amount of people that talk about it on social media and stuff is Fleur de Lis. And it's just a short animated cartoon series about two families where the women are trying to make like extra money because their husbands work at the factory all day and are tired. But I think like what's significant about that show is it's insanely micro budget. I think we funded each episode at about $200 an episode, and the creator uses AI a lot, not to write the story, just to be like not as like the artist, but mainly as a tool, so he uses AI to help him change his voices for different characters, and he uses a lot of the AI for background art, but he manipulates a lot of it, so it's not just like whatever Midjourney puts out. There's a lot of extra work he puts into it, but it allows him to make a cartoon show in about 20 hours as a one-man team. But most importantly, like the animation isn't that great in the sense of like you can tell like this is like, but the storytelling is so good that you just after like the second episode you're just like, I'm in this world. It's kind of like when you watch like South Park and you're like, this is construction paper, but eventually you just forget. You go, oh yeah, this is you just embrace the animation style as part of that world, and it's really amazing what he's done. So Fleur de Lis is really great, and you said Gothics it just won is it the Austin Film Festival or something like that, and it's going on, and I think it just got entered into the Seattle Film Festival, and like these are secular film festivals, and this film is winning these things. And so we just are like our main philosophy is just telling artists, look, just make whatever you want and then find your audience. Like that's our goal, is like, look, if you really love films, if you really love movies and TV shows, and you really want to like start like this underground revolution of artists just like kicking down all the boundaries of Christian film and whatever that means or whatever you think that means, just subscribe to Loor, and just like, instead of spending $20 on Netflix and hoping you get a good show, or spending $20 at Disney and then seeing them feminize Star Wars and the Acolyte or whatever, and you have no say in it whatsoever, just come to Loor. It's $14 a month. And you can actually spend a majority of your monthly subscription funding movies and TV shows once a week. You get an allotment of loot. We call it loot. It's just your video game currency. It's your monthly subscription converted to a fake currency, and then you just spend that out basically voting on the movies and TV shows you want to fund. And the more subscribers we get,
it's a really innovative idea. Sorry. We're both so excited. We both talk over each other. No, it's a really innovative idea that it, just like how Netflix, part of your subscription goes to funding content, obviously, because that's where they get their money from. But they choose the content that they fund, and you don't. Here, part of your subscription goes to funding content, but you choose which content it goes to. So yeah, that's very smart. I'm very interested in seeing where that goes. Well, I know that you have to run. And this is really exciting. Go, yeah, but before we go, what's the last thing you'd want people to know, and where can they go in order if they are
Yeah.
interested in what you're doing and want to support what you're doing?
I I just want to encourage everyone to go to loor.tv and just give it 3 months. Subscribe to Loor TV, give it 3 months, and just start funding content. Just commit. This almost spend, what's that, 45 bucks, 14 bucks a month. You spend like what, less than 50 bucks, and just funding content for 3 months, and just see what happens. Just see what's presented to you, the shows that are presented to you, and if you're an artist, get in touch with us and show us the craziest stuff that every other Christian streaming platform would say no to. That's really what we're asking all the artists now, is like, what was rejected? That's what we want.
Very cool. Well, thank you everybody for so much for joining us. Thank you, Marcus, for joining us today. Yes, this is Religion Unplugged podcast for all of your best religion, news, and culture.